Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. So sorry I didn't make a video last week. I've just been really busy out here in the workshop, moving things around, setting out some new infrastructure, ready for the new machine that I've just purchased. Can you guess what it is? So if you haven't guessed by the title and thumbnail of this video, today this video is about my new Harrison M300 lathe, and I just basically want to try cleaning it up a little bit, going through, testing out some things in it, making sure the bed, the spindle, all stuff like that is good, and hopefully moving forward on the channel, once I think I've done everything I can on the mini lathe, you'll start to see a lot more videos over on the Harrison M300 lathe. So stay tuned if you like machining, because this video is definitely going to be for you. Ta-da! This is my Harrison M300 lathe that I've just bought this weekend and managed to get it into the workshop with the help of the guy that I bought it off. So this thing is massive. Compared to my mini lathe, I'd say this is easily, I don't know, I can't get a number on it. Let's go with 3 times the length, probably 3 times the width nearly. This thing is a beast. So before we run through any checks and start cleaning this up today, let's just give you a few little facts on this lathe. So it runs off a 2.2 kilowatt 3-phase motor, which unfortunately in this garage I've not actually got 3-phase power, so I'm using an inverter which converts single phase to 3-phase. Centre to centre, this thing is, it's about 750 millimeters, which if you can compare that to the mini lathe that I've got over there, which is only 300 millimeters centre to centre, this thing is over 2 times the sort of capacity centre to centre. A few other little facts. So the spindle bore, I believe, is about a 45 millimeter spindle bore, I think it said it was, and it actually runs off a sort of cam lock spindle, so you can easily change out any chucks and things like that if you want to use them in there in the future. So that's going to be really handy if I can get a collet chuck on here. They are a little bit of money, but hopefully in time I'll be able to afford one of them, because that will make turning material and keeping my concentricity really good. So a few other little facts. Comparing this to the Warco WM180, which I believe is about 60 kilos, this thing is closer, or just over actually, 600 kilos. So we're talking 10 times the weight here. So the rigidity on this hopefully is going to be so much better than that of the mini lathe. So unfortunately in today's video I can't actually show you this lathe running, just I've got a few little electrical issues that I need to sort out on the lathe. But what I want to do today is sort of get all the old grime and gunk cleaned off this machine. I want to test the bed just to see the flatness of that compared to the carriage, and also I want to check the spindle for any run out on the nose and possible end play in the spindle itself. So this should be a really good video, just basically going through, showing you the lathe as I'm cleaning it down and checking things, and give a great idea of this lathe and what its capabilities are going to be in the future videos. I think I've got a plan together then of what I'm going to do. Using this bottle of brake cleaner, which is a degreaser, and a few brushes, I think I'm going to give this all a good thorough clean down. I'll probably stick that on a time lapse for you guys, just so you can briefly see that. And then once I've got this to a point where it's fairly clean, I'm never going to be able to get this fully clean without doing a full refurb, but once I've got this to a point where it's fairly clean, I think then we'll go through and we'll start checking some of the ways and spindle. So let's crack on with that. Right then, we're actually getting somewhere with the lathe now. Got the lights sorted, so that's great. Can actually see what we're doing over in this corner of the workshop now. Generally I've got the lathe a lot cleaner, degreased everything and just oiled everything back up. So that's brilliant. And also I've managed to get my head around the electrics, so we've got most of the speeds now working on the headstock. So that's brilliant. I'll show you a little bit more on that in a minute when we check the runout on the quill. But for now I just want to start by checking the flatness really of the bed. So to do this I've got a DTI set up on my carriage over here, and I'm literally just going to run that across the top of the V's on both sides of the bed, and we'll see what sort of variation we get, sort of the plus and minus, and we'll work out the overall sort of flatness from that really. So let's give that a go. Oh. Let's get you in a better position as well so you can see a little bit better what's going on. Right, to start with then, we're starting up this end on the number 10 here. So each indication on this represents 0.01 millimeters. So let's just run down and see where we're at. Actually, I've just quickly changed that. We'll start on 0. So running down the V. Right, that's dropping off a little bit there. So that's dropped down 0.02 millimeters. Right, it's coming back up now. So it's come up to 0.05 there. And it's dropping back down. So overall on that then, if we take the lowest reading, which was 0.02, and the highest reading, which was 0.05, that's a difference of 0.07 across the whole of the bed. So less than 0.1 millimeters. So generally I'm going to say for what I'm using this lathe for, I reckon that's going to be alright. You know, this is a really old lathe, so to have a sort of difference across the bed on that, I think that's pretty good. So now I need to swap this over to the other side and we'll give that a go. See what we get over there. Right, where can we stick this? So we're all set up. We'll start on 0 again and we'll see what sort of flatness this has. So it hasn't gone up at all. This side's actually really good. It's not really moved from 0. So a little bit there towards the end. So that outer V is actually really good. It barely moved from 0, and it wasn't until right at the end where it dropped down 0.02 millimeters. So this side of the V is actually really good, with only a very slight amount of wear on this side. So generally overall then, this is a really good bed, taking it on face value of what I've just measured there. So I'm really happy with the outcome of that. Before I get the cross slide all put back together then, I just want to quickly briefly go over what I've found from taking it apart. So the bed of the cross slide seems in quite good condition. There's a few very light scratches in there, but nothing really that major, and if anything I imagine that's just going to retain the oil actually a lot better than cause any problems for me. The actual gib strip itself, let me have a look at this for you. The actual gib strip itself, other than being a bit grimy, is actually in really good condition as well. Not particularly any major scores on there, and there's plenty of adjustment left in the tapered screws at the end there. So that's a really good sign. So what I'm going to do now is I think I'm going to get this cross slide all back together, and then we'll check the runout and end play on the spindle. The next thing I want to do then is I want to check the runout on this outer taper here and also the flat face of the spindle here. So basically it's going to be a similar way as before when I checked the flatness of the bed. I'm just going to set my DTI gauge. Just going to set that till it goes into 0. About there. And now I've got the lathe set up in the slowest speed, which is 40 RPM. And just going to engage the lever now to start it. And we'll see what sort of run out we get. So there's a very slight fluctuation there, where there must be a little divot. But generally overall that taper, taking away the divot, has got no more than 0.01 millimeters of run out. So that's really good. And now I just want to do a similar test if I can on the surface of this. So actually I'm going to need to do it on the outer part. Well, that's good, pretty much straight onto 0. And let's start it up and try this. So again, there's quite a bit of wobble there, I think just vibrations from the lathe itself. But again, we've got pretty much no run out there, so that's perfect. And while we've got this set up like this, be a great time now just to check for end float. So using a small screwdriver, I'm just going to wedge that behind the spindle there. And we'll just see if there's any end float. There's actually a little bit of end float there, but nothing major. Yeah, I don't think that's anything worth worrying about. There's probably about 0.02, 0.03 millimeters of end float. So nothing that I'm going to dive in and start stripping it all down for or adjusting bits. Right then, that about sums up all the checks I want to do on this lathe for now. Really, I need to start getting familiar with it, turning a few parts in it, and seeing exactly the capabilities of a big proper machine like this. So that's something I'm going to be doing in the next sort of few weeks, is just having a play around on this thing really. For now, before we go today, I might just quickly run through a few of the controls on the lathe, just in case any of you aren't familiar with a big machine like I'm not really. It'd be nice just to familiarise everyone on the channel with the new bit of equipment I've got. So I think I'll run through that before we go today. Starting our way at the headstock end then, this is where you can select what speeds the RPM spins at. So unlike the lathe where it's a variable speed, this sort of lathe you've got to select what speed you want before starting this beast up. So the range is from low to high speed. We've got 58, 40, 85 and 125 RPM. Middle range we've got 260, 180, 370 and 540. And in the top speeds up here we've got 1200, 800, 1700 and 2500. To be honest, I don't think I'm ever going to run the lathe at 1700 and 2500 RPM, just because a machine this size, that's a really scary speed to be approaching with the size of material we'll be spinning in this thing. So I think, unlike the mini lathe where I was quite happy to spin that up at that speed, this sort of lathe I don't think I'm going to ever be achieving those speeds. So maximum we'll be doing on this machine really is sort of 1200 RPM. So these are the controls for that. Moving down, we've got forward and reverse for the lead screw. So if you want to cut towards the chuck, it's in this direction. Moving it over sort of to this direction, and you'll be cutting away from the chuck. So that's those two speeds down here. And then this bottom section here, that's really sort of a quick change gearbox for if you want to do any screw cutting. So unlike the mini lathe where there's a load of change gears you've got to swap out, on this lathe it's just selecting a few dials, going off the chart here, and you can get exactly what sort of pitch threads you like. So this lathe goes from anywhere, just sticking to metric for now by the way, this lathe goes from anywhere from 0.2mm pitch of thread all the way up to 14mm pitch of thread. So that is a massive range for thread cutting on this lathe. So that's going to be something I'm going to have to familiarise myself with and start playing around a bit more. Something I took advantage of really on the mini lathe is I didn't really use the screw cutting for its full potential, just because it was a pain to set up, and the majority of threads that I was doing I use a die. So that's going to be something really good and worth using on this lathe. Oh yeah, got an e-stop up there as well. So moving across the business end. So obviously we've got our hand wheel here for the carriage, we've got our hand wheel here for the cross slide. That's all pretty normal and stuff that we're used to. Down here we've got the stop and start function. So by pulling this down, makes the lathe start up and go forward, and doing it the other way makes it go in reverse. Oh yeah, also down the bottom here it's got an emergency brake as well, so you can use that if you need to. So a reason that I wanted to sort of upgrade lathes as well was just for the power feed option really. So this lathe, it's got X and Y power feed, so that's the carriage and the cross slide, and it's all done down here by some levers. So this lever here engages the power feed, and this lever here selects if you want X or Y position. So by spinning the lathe up and engaging this lever here, starts the power feed. So in this example I'm moving towards the chuck at a really slow feed rate, and if you pull this out and engage this, this then engages the cross feed for doing sort of power feeding face work. So that's going to be a really handy bit of kit in the future. So unlike the mini lathe where I had to use my half nut to use the power feed, this has got its own separate feed system for that, so it's going to reduce any wear on the lathe, unlike the mini lathe where you're using that lead screw for pretty much everything. And other than that, this is pretty much a basic lathe really. The tailstock is pretty similar to, let's get over there. So the tailstock is pretty basic, very similar to the mini lathe. It's got an MT3 taper in here, we've got a handle, we've got a lock for the quill and a lock for the actual tailstock itself. So that's really simple. Unfortunately when I bought this lathe it didn't come with a DRO. It's got these really weird dials, which I'm going to say they're probably the really basic start of a DRO before they were really invented. So in the future I will be fitting a DRO to this, just because I think it's really handy bit of kit to have on the lathe. I know I loved it on the mini lathe, so this lathe is going to be no exception really. That about sums up the Harrison M300. I hope you've enjoyed this video then guys. This is a really new and exciting start to the channel. It's sort of, we're moving away from hobbyist machining now and getting into the realms of where we can actually start to machine big items. So hopefully like me you're going to appreciate this lathe on the channel, because I think it's going to be a really good bit of new content for the channel moving forward. So if you think this is a good idea, hit that thumbs up button please. Other than that guys, that pretty much sums up today's video. Don't know if you can see my breath, but it's really cold in the workshop. So moving forward over the next couple of months I might move to fortnightly videos, just so I can try getting more detailed content in there and not just putting out any old rubbish for you guys. So let me know in the comments below what you think to that idea. If you want to see weekly videos continue, then I'm going to try my hardest to make that happen, but every now and again we might have to go to a fortnightly video like has happened today. So that about sums up all of this week's video. Thank you for watching the video. Please carry on supporting the channel, and I'll see you in the next one guys.